Good afternoon. This is April 12th, and this is the Bicycle Advisory Committee Engineering Subcommittee. And for those involved, this notice needs to be read. This meeting may involve the remote participation by members either by telephone or other electronic means due to the local public health emergency, novel coronavirus pandemic, pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota statutes, section 13D021. So welcome, everybody. So today we've got some very interesting projects. Those are in the email that actually there was an attachment there on the limbs, and if you are capable of following along, or you'll have them there afterwards. But we have 4 items up for discussion today, and we're going to begin with the Lowry Avenue Northeast project. It's at 30% with Kelly Augusto from Hennepin County and Chris Kartheiser from Minneapolis Public Works, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm Kelly Augusto, as Dan said, with Hennepin County, and I'm managing the Lowry Avenue Northeast roadway design. And we last presented to this committee in mid-December of 2021 at the 15% level and had looked at a couple of options at the time. So I have updates to share today. And Chris, I didn't mean to jump in and not give you a chance to say anything to you here.
No, that's great. Take it away. I've got nothing else.
Okay, thank you. I'll just share a current view of the layout as we talk through the updates then. Can everybody see what I'm sharing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so since that 15% level presentation, we've made the focus on the option for Lowry Avenue that includes bike facilities for the entire length of the roadway between Marshall Street to Johnson Street. So the layout that is in the link in your agenda is the one that we're looking at on the screen now. And I think it addresses several of the items that were brought up as a result of the presentation in December and your resolution after that. So we've also looked at moving the shared use path to the north side of the roadway. Previously, we were showing it on the south side of the roadway. Another big change to the layout since you last saw this is that we're in areas where we have 3 lanes for vehicles next to one another. We're looking at a 10-foot width there for vehicular lanes. Previously, we were showing 10.5, I believe. The outer lanes would still have a 2-foot width of curb gutter to the face of curb to use if needed. But currently, this is how we have things depicted in the layout. What else can I point out here? So another update as we scroll through the layout and get to the intersection with University Avenue is that we're showing a much less abrupt shift in the alignment along Lowry Avenue through this intersection. Mostly we were looking at ways to minimize major impacts to adjacent properties and businesses and trying to avoid as much acquisition as we could while still accommodating a WB40 size truck turning movement at this intersection from the MnDOT Trunk Highway to the county roadway. But that still leaves a good amount of space on the north side for a shared use path configuration here. I'm just going to keep moving through the layout and try to point things out as we go. We're looking more closely at the space that we have under the BNSF bridge overpass. And I appreciate the example that you pointed out in your resolution to look at a similar configuration on 18th, I think it was. So we did take a look at that. We're pretty constrained on space under the railroad overpass and are looking at where the piers are today and how we could make changes to the roadway underneath the bridge to still have space for bikes and peds to get through. So this is one section included in the layout that you all have as well to look more closely at the dimensions here. I might be going a little quickly through this too if there's questions as I go through. I'm not monitoring if there was a hand raised yet. I don't see any. But I think you can jump in with a question anytime, or I can just keep scrolling through and we can look at questions at the end as well. All right. Also to note with this version of the layout are the transit symbols depicted as the black and white legend are local service stops that Metro Transit has plans to remove as part of this project and kind of consolidate some stops as we go along the corridor to areas that are a bit more utilized based on their records and their counts. We are looking at space for a possible future bus rapid transit line on Lowry Avenue, and we're looking at space for platform areas at the Lowry Avenue, Central Avenue intersection as well, exploring that with Metro Transit to make sure that we're not designing something that would need to be completely redone as they come through with a future BRT line in the next 10 years or so, was their estimate. Let me go back to an area with medians real quick. We're showing cut throughs for crossings in median areas that were not depicted in the layout before. Otherwise, previously we were looking at a shared use path east of Central to Johnson Street already. It was on the south side and now we're showing it on the north side. So that is an update in this segment of Lowry Avenue. Otherwise, nothing else has really changed here. With the exception of adding a median at the Fillmore Street intersection with Lowry Avenue. This is where Metro Transit sees having a stop for local service instead of the stops that are currently at Taylor Street and Pierce Street on either side. And so we're looking at putting in a median here to discourage vehicles from passing around a stopped bus and still be stopping in lane. I think those are the highlights of the updates that I have for you this round. Chris, did I miss anything?
No, nothing that I can think to add right now. But yeah, happy to take questions or comments from
Absolutely.
members.
Oh, I see some hands.
Okay. Yeah, you want me to? I'll keep an eye on the hands, Kelly, and I'll let you. We'll go back and forth from there. So Jesse, I think you're up first.
Sure. I guess the first question is, I know that signal locations are shown on the layout here. I'm wondering at what point in time potential RFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacon locations, would be discussed. I know that one of the still one of the kind of outstanding things is where those locations are in relation to where the bike boulevards are. I know that from experience like this past weekend, it's fairly difficult to cross Lowry. I understand that those medians are there, but just being able to find acceptable gaps in traffic, it can be difficult at certain times of the day. And so being able to squeeze in something in there would be helpful.
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, I remember seeing a request in the resolution from the BAC previously. We haven't gotten to that level of detail in what we're looking at here yet. I'm sure it's something we can still look at. There's typically warrants that we look for those to meet to include those in a project. So I think if we're able to agree on a configuration for the design of Lowry in general, that's a detail that can then come along with the progression through the design.
Yeah, from my understanding, signals have warrants. RFBs don't. They just have recommended thresholds. The medians that are showing, they have like the pedestrian crossings built in, but they don't necessarily have bicycle crossings built in. Is it intended that cyclists would kind of have to like go into the lane on Lowry a little bit and then like scoot over and then like go back into the lane on Lowry again a little bit and then go? Or would there be either wider crossings to let bicyclists through, or is there going to be some sort of push from the city to have the center openings for cyclists that are a little bit narrower so cars can't get through, but wide enough so that the cyclists can get through there?
That is not a detail that we're showing on this layout. You're right. The cut throughs are set up for pedestrian crossings, and I guess I would look to the city and to this group for advice on how we would incorporate that in the details of the design. I've seen cut throughs placed in medians when there's a specific bike boulevard crossing or that kind of thing. So we could definitely incorporate them in those cases, or where it's wherever it's needed and there's a median where we can provide that. I know that the width we're showing in this location that's on the screen is a good amount of width for a bike to sit in the median based on an average bike length.
And then related to the bicycle boulevard thing still too, I think Matthew, before he left, he indicated that the city was looking at shifting the one that's on, I think it's Taylor to Fillmore bicycle boulevard, and Fillmore right now has a cul-de-sac, and so I don't know if it would be a city-led thing or if the county would be able to do it with their project, but having a connection from the end of the cul-de-sac through to the intersection to be able to link that bicycle boulevard would be helpful as well, rather than just the sidewalks. If it's just the sidewalks, then bicycles have to go on someone's driveway to get up and then go on the sidewalk for a little bit to get over.
Okay. Yeah, currently we're only showing access for the sidewalk to go all the way through that area where to connect from the cul-de-sac to Lowry Avenue. So that would be a change that I think we could incorporate if that's desired.
Thanks. I'll have.
I'll just confirm that that is shown on our AAA network, and so that is a useful thing to point out there, Jesse. And from to address the first question of the bike cut throughs, I think the city is interested in looking more closely at that specifically for Fifth, I think is the only one that has a median that's also on our AAA network. So that's something we can take a closer look at, and we should also be, we haven't gotten to the discussion of like what this means for emergency vehicle access and if that needs to be mountable or not. So I think there's a couple details with those closed medians to figure out yet.
Agreed.
Okay, if we're ready to move on, Joey?
Hi. So between about 4th Street, I guess I'm wondering, my question is, what is the minimum width you're looking at for the boulevards? Because from 4th Street northeast to somewhere, I don't know, somewhere east of Central, you're showing an 8-foot shared use path and a 6-foot boulevard. And I mean, I like green space as much as the next guy, but 8 feet is really going to be pretty narrow for a bi-directional bikeway that's shared with pedestrians as well. So I'm wondering if you could consider making that, I don't know, even a 4-foot boulevard in that area to get the bikeway up to 10 feet would be, I think, very, very appreciated.
Sure, I appreciate that feedback. Yeah, we're definitely trying to show it as a 10-foot shared use path where it's easier to see that there's a good amount of space to do that. In the location that you're talking about, we are currently showing it as an 8-foot shared use path. We're kind of looking at existing retaining walls along Lowry Avenue also in terms of trying to minimize impacts to those, and are also looking at ways to provide or just make sure we have space for pedestrian lighting enhancements along this corridor. So those bases take up some space, and then you need some clear zone to those as well. So it's a lot to fit in here, but it's the width of the path is definitely something we'll be looking at more closely too.
Okay.
Could I add a word on just some of the constraints, Kelly?
Yes.
We're also dealing with above ground utilities here. There's a big flood issue along this corridor, so stormwater infrastructure is something that we're paying a lot of attention to, and as you're pointing out, there's not a lot of room to work with. So just want to put out there that those are a couple of the other things, as well as transit stations and being able to fit the path, you know, at that place to work with a BRT shelter eventually, are just a couple of the constraints we're working with.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, Phil?
Yeah, Kelly, thank you. It's great to see the improvements here. And simple question, I just wanted to clarify that the yellow markings are raised pavement as we cross.
Correct.
All right,
Yes.
great. Yeah, it's looking good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeremy? You're not on speaker, Jeremy. You're there you go.
Sorry, not having been to the earlier meeting where this was presented, I'm not sure if this was addressed, so if it was, I apologize for the retread. But is the 14-foot travel lane necessary? And I mean, that is really quite wide, and beyond encouraging speeding. Oh, okay, so it's 11.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought there. Just wanted to share the typical section there to give a little more context and clarity to that.
I see.
And the 14-foot width being all the way to the curb face on either side allows space for county maintenance vehicles to get through for snow removal purposes and that kind of thing.
I see. Okay. I was going to say, I wanted to echo the sentiment about the width of the shared use path. It would be sad ever to see a boulevard constrained just for the need of trees. But if there could have been a way to get that out of the travel lanes, that would have been wonderful. It sounds like that's already been best.
I think in these locations with the medians, we're at the minimum that we could go for travel lanes.
Can I make a suggestion? Sorry, I didn't have my hand raised. This is Tyler
ahead,
from the
Tyler.
Minneapolis.
Yep.
This is Tyler from the Minneapolis Park Board. One solution you might look at is actually, if you could, just shifting so you have less green space on the south side that's shaded by buildings, and have more green space in the boulevard on the north side. So you have space for trees and whatnot that will actually accept that sunshine. Trees aren't going to grow really well in like a 4-foot boulevard. They're actually going to do pretty bad. 5 foot's really the minimum. So if we did want to increase that shared use path width and take away from the green space, which I kind of never advocate for, being a park guy, I would suggest kind of rethinking how you balance that center of that road, and planting on the sunny side of the road could be kind of nice.
That is a good thought. Thank you.
Matthew Hendricks.
I think Matthew might be muted if he is talking.
Thank you. I thought I had muted myself and had not. Okay. So my question is similar to the one previous about whether there is the possibility of shrinking something besides the boulevard. So going back to a 10-foot lane with the reaction zones on either side, so you have effectively 13, or in some places reducing the center median to 4 where 6 is shown, or if it's even possible to go less than 4 there.
Sure. That's a good point. We could look at what flexibility we have with the median width more closely. I think 4 feet is the minimum without getting a variance, but I can check on that.
6 is the minimum, Matthew, at a pedestrian crossing in order for it to be considered a refuge.
Yeah, and I should clarify, I think 6 is really good at the intersections where we have to, like, for example, the intersection shown on the screen, the boulevard drops and you've got the expanded median, like there, 6 makes a lot of sense to me. But closer to where the D section line is, or even a little bit to the east of there, if you could go to something that's like a short Jersey barrier and takes less horizontal space, or is less wide in the cross section, maybe only 2 or 3 feet wide, and then that frees up more space for the boulevard, and then also reducing the lanes from 14 down to like a curved 12 or 13.
I think there might be things we could look at with the median. The lane widths themselves are the minimum from what I hear from our maintenance staff to be able to get our vehicles through.
So like the plows from like one edge of the plow to the other are literally 15 feet wide or 14 feet wide.
I think it's partly too just when you're pushing like snow material along, you need some space to, or just some reaction to the curb so that you're not just plowing along the edge of the curb.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to take a grab at this, Dan Miller. And Kelly, you'd mentioned something that you are looking at some possibilities for underneath that bridge. Do you have any thoughts that you can share with us, what you're looking at?
Really, oops, the light's gonna go off in the office on me, sorry. Sorry. Really, we only have the typical section that's included in the layout to show what space we think we have and what we could possibly do with changing the curbs under the bridge for the vehicle lanes. We are gonna look at the space a little more closely, get a little more accurate survey information and data that way to just get all of those little inches that we have under here, a more accurate picture of that.
Okay.
Just a minute.
So there would be a chance that you could take that 15-foot lane and shrink it down and somehow expand the curb or create either a bike ped facility there. So you've got the shared use path for perhaps one type of user and the other for the other.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there'd be a way to use some space on both sides of the piers here.
That's fantastic news. Yeah. Thanks for thinking about that.
Absolutely.
If there are other questions, please let me know. I'm going to go ahead and ask a few questions here until I see a hand. We had talked about the raised crossings, and they're still in there. They're not in the legend. And I know that in other cases in the city, raised crossings have shown up on plans, but they've been eliminated because of, well, the most common I've heard is stormwater, but how is that looking as a possibility? Is there a serious chance that that is going to happen?
Good point on the legend. I thought we had a note here for that somewhere saying that we're looking at the possibility of raised crossings.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that note shows up in here somewhere that I'm not remembering, but you're right that sometimes there might be an issue with stormwater once we are able to get into that analysis as our design work progresses, that would preclude the ability to be able to raise that up through there. It's not a level of detail that we've gotten to yet.
Sure.
Once we
Understood.
select a layout, we'll dig into those details more, certainly.
Yeah. So I've just seen them come and go, and they've been exciting because they provide some continuity. They provide safety, and they provide some continuity to a trail. And an ongoing issue I have with if you don't have a raised crossing, you don't get zebra crossings across that thing, according to our street design guideline. And it's something that I think that both the county and the city, let's get something going. If we can't have raised crossings here, can we get something that whether it's the green conflict zone plus a zebra stripe, I don't know, but just so that we've got continuity and some safety on those intersections would be terrific. And I don't know, Chris, do you have any thoughts or?
On the raised crossings particular?
Yeah,
or
just being able to push on if we can't get raised crossings because of this reason or that somehow those intersections are identified as a trail crossing.
Yeah, I would have to look to our typical kind of guidance on that. I think the street design guide kind of shows what the signage would look like and things like that, especially if it is raised. And I think Kelly is exactly right that sometimes the reason those don't happen is the engineering doesn't quite work out for the stormwater. But we can take a look at those details, and I'll make sure to keep that in mind if they don't go through kind of what we do to flag those.
So far in my understanding of the street design guidelines is it's nothing, and that happened on Johnson Street and it's going to happen on Bryant, and it'd be nice to have a good look at that guidelines too. I mean, the guidelines say that they're open for change, and I just think this is a great avenue to make sure that happens. So in accordance with that, I'm sure that the path material hasn't been decided whether it's going to be asphalt or concrete, but the driveways, the cut-throughs throughout here are, I'm not sure if they're cement and light in color or if they're dark in color. Do you know what you're shooting for there?
I
ahead.
think we're, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, go, please.
Okay. I think the driveways are being shown as concrete for a material right now in our layout, and the path is being shown as bituminous.
Okay. Because it's, again, this is a continuity thing that if you look at 18th Avenue, it's a perfect place to take a look at this and ride it. I mean, it's or walk it. It's just very disruptive. It can be very disruptive. And in certain places on Johnson, they were able to pass that through with the iced concrete, the gray iced concrete, and it reads better as a trail and as something that you're crossing over. So it'd be a recommendation that it'd be nice to see if we could do that. And I think we've got a couple of other, nope, people had their hands up and then they went down again.
I appreciate those comments, Dan.
Yeah. It's just a thought to think about. No other hands. So one thing that just looking at this plan that I find, I mean, it's a great plan. I think it's come a long way since the last time, the last plan that we saw, is that the intersections are not fleshed out as far as how pedestrians move across them. In some cases, at 30%, we wind up, this is typically the last time we see a project, and some stuff like what may appear at 10% or 15% is really the stuff that the public and we are particularly interested in. Would you be willing to come back to be able to show us what has been kind of revised about this?
Well, yes. I mean, we have, Chris, I'd say yes. We haven't gotten into the plans yet for this project or some of the details that that this committee has pointed out in your resolution to be able to even address those points. So I think it would make sense to at least address the items that you all have brought up and close the loop on that.
Well, I appreciate that because you did that on University and 4th and it was fantastic. I know you worked through a number of those things. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I don't see any other hands up. Kelly, do you need anything from us?
I'd just like to add that we're also looking at shifting the construction year for this project to 2024. We haven't updated our website yet, but we're just needing to have a little more time to address the layout that we're going to select and get through the design and the right-of-way process. And we're just looking at the flexibility that we have with our federal funding to do that.
Okay. All right. One last thing. Has the discussion about a speed limit change to 25 miles an hour been pursued at all?
It hasn't been pursued yet. No, it's not something that the county has the authority to designate, but not to say that we can't help facilitate getting those conversations going.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, I'll just add that we do anticipate bringing this to layout review once the layout is kind of finalized here. So I do think if the group has an opinion on this project and wants to put that in a resolution, we would welcome that and include that in our layout review materials for council. All right, very good.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All righty, so I think we need to move on. Thank you so much, Kelly and Chris. And next up on the agenda, is the Concrete Rehabilitation Program, 30% with Christian Zimmerman of Minneapolis Public Works. Good afternoon, Christian.
Hi all, how's it going?
Doing good, yeah.
Thanks for having me back. I came to you all, it's been a while, late fall I think it was, early winter. So I just wanted to come back and provide an update for this concrete streets rehabilitation program that we're doing this year. specifically for Minnehaha Avenue. For the portion I want to show you all today, just kind of a little refresher here on what this program is. Essentially, this is the city's program that addresses our concrete streets. We have approximately 155 miles of concrete streets in the city. Most of these roadways are fairly old. They were built somewhere between the early 60s and the middle 70s. So we have this program just to maintain these roadways. We do joint sealing, joint repairs, diamond grinding to kind of smooth the surface, and then also replace any broken panels, either have panels or full panels, just kind of depending on their condition. And there's also, some driveway work as it comes up, a little bit of curb and gutter in spots as needed. But the overall goal of this project is just to extend the life of the roadway ahead of any costlier reconstructions that may come through in the future. This, depending on kind of what the condition is of the roadway and the type of traffic that it receives, this type of project can improve the life of the roadway by at least 10 years for the most part. So just a little bit of background, just as a refresher for this program. Kind of bring up a map here of what we're looking at. So this is a fairly short segment of Minnehaha. So this dark gray that you see here, this is the roadway that we're looking at. The project extends so East 24th Street to the south, and then just heading up Minnehaha to the south side of Franklin Avenue. We won't be getting into Franklin at all. We'll be stopping just a little shy of there where the pavements change back to asphalt. We do have two intersections that we're looking at larger improvements for, and that's really what I want to show you all tonight. So one intersection is this Minnehaha portion where it meets Franklin, and the other intersection that we'll start with first is over here at Minnehaha and 21st. There's some pretty, kind of angular geometry that we want to address at that location. So the first location I want to talk about is Minnehaha and 21st, and kind of show our concept for this area. Right now, Minnehaha does have existing bike lanes on it, and we will continue to maintain those. So we don't have a change in the bike infrastructure here. But we do have some changes of the curb lines that are kind of adjacent to the bikeway. Will definitely help to shorten those distances across 21st Street and provide some additional safety features there, while we also have additional crossings that we're bringing up to grade for pedestrians. You can also see kind of these green highlighted areas. Those are all going to be areas that we're removing current hard surfaces for green infrastructure. Part of this will be actual stormwater management, so it will be able to function and store and capture rainwater and storm water off of the roadway, while also doing some different plantings. So there's some exciting aspects with that. But you can kind of see the realignment of 21st Avenue, really kind of pulling this over and creating this more aligned T intersection with Minnehaha. Currently, that just kind of comes out at this large angle and has quite a long crossing here, and kind of inhibits vehicles turning from Minnehaha onto 21st with some pretty comfortable angles for them with higher speeds. So we're trying to reduce those and just slow everything down at this location. One aspect that we are still working through is the bus stop that's located over here. With our proposed bump out here in this corner, we probably need to move this bus stop up a little bit further, not by much. So we'll probably need to pour a new pad for that landing, but a fairly minor change to that. And then on the south side here, we are working with a property owner right on the other side of the sidewalk here with some current curb cuts that they have to Minnehaha. So we are working with them as an opportunity to potentially close off those two and just have their access from the alley. And that would allow us to bump out into the parking lane here and then do our ADA ramps within that bump out. If we aren't able to do the bump out, we will still be able to proceed with doing the ADA ramps. So that's kind of the overview of this intersection here, and I've got one other one, and then we'll open it up for questions. So this is our intersection with Minnehaha and Franklin, and there's a little bit more changes here to the bike infrastructure than at the last location. Currently, we do have vehicles that as you approach Franklin, you do kind of turn over into this dedicated right turn lane. Right now, the bike lane on Minnehaha kind of just shares the space with this travel lane. So we are looking to continue that striping to dedicate a space for bicyclists within this area. And then on the kind of that westbound or side of the street, right now, this is one travel lane. This yellow striping here does exist today, and we're looking to keep that. However, we don't have a designated bike lane that is kind of heading south here. It doesn't pick up until roughly about this point down here after this driveway. It's more of a larger shoulder, and it doesn't really have a use as of today. So we're looking to kind of re-envision that space as an area that we could provide that bike lane. We're also looking at this as an area that we can provide a median that will provide that physical barrier between vehicles and bicyclists for this area. And then we'll actually be doing some additional greening within that median also. And then that bike lane, as it approaches down here at the driveway, will then shift over to meet with the existing bike lane here. The last aspect here doesn't necessarily affect the bike lane too much, but we are going to be extending the boulevard space here. Right now, this is additional concrete pavement here for kind of the sidewalk. It's basically just a larger area. We'll be maintaining a standard width sidewalk through here and then removing a part of this and converting it back to planted boulevard where we can catch additional stormwater and off of the road and just rain in general. With that, I think those are kind of the concepts that I wanted to bring up, and just kind of get your eyes on this and any feedback that you may have. Oh, sorry, I do want to note this is scheduled for 2022 construction.
Adrian?
Yeah, thanks. Hey, this is Adrienne Bachheim from CPED. I just had a question about this one here at Franklin. I just went through this intersection the other day, and just north of what's shown in the image here on Franklin, there's that median there, so that northbound cars and bikes can't turn left to go west. And I'm just curious, what's the thinking in terms of, okay, for a biker going north on this segment, if they want to go west on Franklin, what is their process for that?
Yeah, right now with this, since we're not getting into Franklin, this would essentially be heading the bike lanes into Franklin to go eastbound. Since there's that median there, we still wouldn't have a dedicated space to be able to get out there and with this program to have bicyclists make that left turn. If they want to go west, I think maybe one of the options I think is 24th. I think it's 24th Street, or I can't remember that roadway off the top of my head, but I think there's an opportunity to go west on 24th and then head north on that route. I think if someone wants to go west, it's a little bit of you know, you got to kind of figure out that routing. And I think that's just one of the concessions as a few years ago when the county redid Franklin here and put in that closed median, that there would have to be that routing.
Yeah, it's a complicated intersection. I get that.
It certainly is, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And overall, I think this is a great idea. There's just tons of pavement in this area, so I'm glad something's happening with that. So looks good otherwise.
Yeah, this is in our south side green zone, so we definitely wanted to make an effort to, you know, minimize any of our hardscapes here and convert as much as that as we could to native plantings and green infrastructure.
Oh, sorry, one other quick thing on the 21st intersection.
Yep.
Just curious if those crosswalks could be painted. I think sometimes it's maybe difficult for cars to see that people are trying to cross there and that it's an actual intersection.
Yeah, and so typically our intersections at signalized intersections will be striped, and at our unsignalized, they typically aren't. Sometimes if they're near a, you know, a school or a park, you know, that's creating quite a few trips across the street, sometimes there can be some aspects there that get these striped. At this location, we don't really have those criteria that it's meeting. We have talked about this of potentially marking crosswalks, but at this time it doesn't meet a lot of our criteria to mark. However, you know, with the roadway today, with it being fairly wide and with that poor geometry, it didn't make for a great crossing, although we didn't really have all of the crossings at this intersection today. But we do hope that, you know, with the introduction of the better geometry and the bump outs that's shrinking this roadway down, that we can get those better sight lines too on pedestrians, even if we're not able to stripe this crosswalk.
Okay, great, thank you.
Aaron.
Hey, yeah, thank you. So I had a question, I guess, about more about the Franklin section. I think what you've shown here looks great. One thing that I thought that I would suggest is if you look at the kind of northbound, if you call it that, of Minnehaha Avenue, as it becomes more due north there, as it does that little curve. One thing that I could see happening is drivers cutting the corner a little bit if it's just a painted bike lane there. And so I'm curious if there's any chance you could slide those, like at least using this illustration, slide those parked cars like one car length farther away and create kind of a protected just corner, like elbow there for cyclists, and move that bike lane through that. And then just kind of have it reemerge with the painted stripe just to prevent someone from possibly getting struck by a driver there.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, and I think if I'm understanding that right, is you kind of bring the bike lane up, and then, you know, somewhere in this area, kind of move it over this way to kind of avoid this curve here. I think if I'm understanding that right.
Yeah, exactly. And like obviously there could be some complications in figuring it out, but just yeah, something so that because if you see, and you maybe have seen this already in other spots, but wherever bike lanes are just kind of painted on those little curves, you tend to see the paint get worn off right there, especially on the outer part of it. So yeah, that's my only suggestion. Otherwise, I really like that the separation created on the southbound side.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. I think we'll take another look at that and see if there's maybe an opportunity that we could think through of maybe there's an option that we could explore that provides a little more protection to cyclists on that curve.
Cool, thank you.
Matthew Hendricks.
I just wanted to second or third the comment that this looks like a great project, and I really like the improvements here. I just had one quick question, and that is whether that hashed area, the area that's hashed with yellow paint near the Franklin intersection, could also be converted to green space. I think that might be helpful as a visual cue and like a cue to slow down as drivers are headed northbound on the hill.
Yeah, and so we did look at a couple different designs for this kind of aspect here, and unfortunately we do have fairly tight budget with this program, so we weren't able to do everything that maybe we would prefer to do in a kind of perfect world. But it was something that we did look at of, could we convert more of this space to green space? And kind of our certain aspects that we looked with that is when we get into that, our costs really start to get high because kind of the slope of the roadway starts to change quite a bit too. And we start to have drainage issues, and we do have a pretty large, I think it's a water main that kind of comes through right in this area that we'd have to deal with. So our cost really started to drive up pretty significantly when we started to explore this area. So unfortunately, we weren't able to do more with this area. But I think in a reconstruct one day of Minnehaha, I think that there would potentially be some pretty significant changes to this alteration here that could maybe introduce more green space.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I also want to say that I think this looks really nice. I really like seeing the green spaces added. I guess my question was about what the travel lane width is, because in my experience of riding down this section of Minnehaha, and it'll obviously be changed with this rehab project, but it's got a very open feel and people get going pretty fast, and that bike lane has no buffer at all, not even like an extra line, not an actual physical buffer, but just something to queue. And so I'm just wondering if it's possible, or is there space to put in a double line there, or just like even a 1 foot buffer for the bike lane?
Yeah, I think on this section here, especially, I think we could look at that. And part of this does look kind of fairly wide here, just because we're including kind of in the drawing here is including that 2 foot gutter space. So if we do have an extra foot, we might be able to kind of get in that additional long line, and if we could maybe get that down to at least this curve here, and maybe that could act as a double piece that someone else had mentioned earlier about this curve. So I think that's something that we'll look at, see if we can't squeeze out another foot or two if it's available here, just to try and narrow this up and give a little bit more protection to cyclists as much as we can. And just as far as the travel lanes on kind of the main portion of Minnehaha, we're essentially trying to maintain that space so we don't have a shift in the middle of the roadway. But I think there is maybe an opportunity to kind of explore kind of from this curve going north here, if we have some additional room there. Okay, so
but the rest of the segment doesn't sound like there's enough space to do a buffer of any sort.
Yeah, we're really limited because we're just touching this intersection rather than that full stretch. And I think what that would require is for us to probably have to do a restriping of kind of that whole section to shrink down these lanes. And that's unfortunately just not within our scope on this project to do that full roadway width or length, I mean.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, Phil.
Yeah, Christian, this is really exciting to see all the green space added, because this is a stretch where cars really do go fast. It has that kind of Wild West feel. So great addition. Two two thoughts come to mind. One is if people want, for going west on Franklin, people take 22nd Street, that sort of new in the last 5 years or so, to get onto Cedar further west, coming up to Franklin. So this would be a case where signage would be really helpful, so people don't get swinging all the way over to 20th Avenue. If we can send them on that little east-west stretch, 22nd to Cedar, then up to Franklin, signage would be good. And the other thing is, it so happens that there's an underground house at 21st Avenue and 22nd Street on the northwest corner. So yeah, just up 22nd Avenue, right at the corner. And I know that way over on 34th Avenue in Seward, some proposed green spaces like this met with some neighbor resistance, fears about flooding basins, because as you get close to the river, people do have some troubles with water. But I'm thinking that it would be especially good, and I could even do it to new owner, but would it be standard to just notify people around an intersection when you're adding? Again, I'm just imagining the underground house owner freaking out when they see all this infiltration space, and then it's just one of those issues. But would there be any notification before the construction?
So there will be residents that live along the routes that are getting these changes, are receiving letters in the mail of this work. And we actually later tonight, I'm meeting with the Seward neighborhood group where I'll be talking about this also. So there are a couple opportunities there that residents can learn about the projects.
Oh,
and
okay, that's perfect.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and there will also be, as construction starts, there will be additional notices and such. So there will be opportunities for residents to kind of be aware of this work.
Oh, okay. Actually, the other thing that on 22nd Avenue, the park board came along in the last 2 or 3 months and cut down 14 trees, I think, and it really there was no notice. It was actually just a administrative failure, but it really sort of annoyed folks there. And the S&G knows about that. So you're meeting with S&G, that's perfect. That's just what we want to do. Thanks.
Yep. I'll note for your signage notice, and thank you, 22nd, not 24th. I couldn't remember which one it was.
Yeah,
we
right.
are looking at additional signage for this, and specifically we are looking at the signage for motor vehicles, because we have heard a lot of vehicles kind of get up to Franklin and kind of make that a legal left. So we are looking at some signage there. And I think that's maybe a good point, that we could also maybe at that same time look at signage for cyclists that they can use 22nd also. And I think that's a good idea.
Great, thanks.
Jeremy, do you have another question? Okay. Christian, I have just a couple of questions, and with the screen that you have up now, with the dotted line on the left side for the bike lane and the solid on the right side, and nothing in between, would this be a possibility for a green conflict zone? Just, I'm not
here.
Okay, how's that? Hear me now? With that space that's at that turn, could you put a green conflict zone in there across that opening?
So are you talking this space here or this one here? You're talking where the roadway,
where the car is turning. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So typically we don't mark the green conflict through an adjoining intersection there. At these side streets that are just with a unsignalized. At our signalized locations, we do, but typically not in locations such as this one here.
Okay. Alrighty, and then if you could just pull up the other image real quick. And on that, very up on the upper corner where the north lane is going, and you had mentioned that there might be some kind of protection you can do at that intersection. As you can see, that turn going east onto Franklin is wide open up there, and some of that protection might be helpful, just to let people know that that's you know, a bike lane, just to keep them from cutting into that corner. And
I just want to understand, are you talking about this one here, this top left one?
no,
Or
the other one.
This
Yeah.
one, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. Because I can see there's a dilemma to get people north and south from 20th on this. It's just kind of wacky, because you go down to the corner there, and if you're going east on Franklin, you can take the street, but if you're going west, you either cross the street or you take the sidewalk until you get to that intersection. So signing, I think, is a potential way of redirecting people on 22nd, or, you know, is that sidewalk wide enough to support being a shared use path? I don't know. And then if you go down to where Aaron had talked about that cars coming around that corner when it bends to the south there, would there be a chance to extend that green space so it's more blocky on that corner, so cars can't just ease out of it? In other words, just lower it down and sort of bring it to where the car is right now, the green space.
Yeah, and I'll note with this just kind of being like the concept plan is the engineering sets are drawn up. I think they're probably drawn a little better than my Illustrator capabilities. So we'll make sure that this is kind of, you know, has that standard you know, some sort of function there, so it you know, keeps cars where they want to be, and we don't create a, you know, a conflict there where vehicles are able to just kind of veer out easily into the bike lane. So yeah, we'll work that out in the engineering drawings.
Okay. Same thing to the just in the other southbound lane where it's just bent in. Maybe if that extended out a little bit, you know, to the south, it might be just a little nicer transition, and rather than that squareness that's there. And that could be just your illustration too.
Sure.
Yeah. The last question, the bike lane widths here are?
They'll maintain at 6 feet.
Okay,
and
very good.
I think actually this one here along kind of, since it's right up against the curb here, I think we're actually looking at around 8 feet.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Deanna.
Dan or somebody, what is a green conflict zone?
Yeah, maybe I can pull one up on a Google Maps here. Let's see. Of course. Sorry, one second. I'm just trying to find one that we've got. Here we go.
Oh, it's a tree.
So this is another section of Minnehaha that was constructed a couple years ago by the county. As you can see, this green conflict marking is for the bike lane, and they're at signalized intersections. Kind of what they do is they signal to cyclists and to vehicles themselves that this is kind of, you know, a point in conflict where there may be a shared space, and especially at these turns. Oh, go back to we go. So it's just kind of an indication to vehicles to be giving that right of way and being aware of those cyclists that this is their dedicated space as they come through these intersections. And it just gives that little bit of extra highlight at kind of a predominant intersection, typically where you have more turning vehicles, just to be aware of the cyclist. And sometimes at certain locations, the cyclist and the vehicles sometimes share the space as vehicles make a right-hand turn. So it's just kind of a visual cue to each other to kind of be aware of each other's presence.
And so why would you not put it at the Y there at 21st?
So typically we just do these at signalized intersections. We don't do them at our more local streets. So typically just where we have a larger volume of turns occurring, which are typically at our signalized intersections.
Okay, so in essence, you don't see enough volume here. It seems to me like it would almost be more needed if it's not signalized, because cars would not be looking behind, looking in their mirror, expecting a bike to come through at that intersection.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where we are trying to ensure that we're providing as much protection as we can at these locations, but also understanding that we need to be able to maintain these facilities as we build them out. And we just have, I'm not sure how many intersections, unsignalized intersections we have in the city, but it would be a significant amount of maintenance cost and just ongoing operations that we would also have at these intersections. So we try to be really strategic in where we do these types of improvements, kind of at where we're getting that highest cost benefit kind of intersection, and tends to be at these signalized intersections rather than our more local streets.
Yeah, I do know that those green things need to be painted practically annually. It goes away. I get it. So it just seems like it is exactly this kind of intersection. If there was a lot of volume at it, that where you would see a conflict. So okay.
And maybe just to add, Deanna, so I think because it is a citywide policy, and Christian did a good job of explaining why that is, we do know that the majority of crashes happen at signalized intersections. And so that is part of kind of what feeds this policy as well. And there are examples where non-signalized may have it the same way, like we kind of look for rectangular rapid flash beacons if it's like a safe routes to school, or maybe just kind of a unique thing. So it's not that it couldn't happen, but it does need to kind of pass that test of why.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, Jeremy, you still have your hand up. I'm not sure if that's just a holdover from the last time, or. Okay. Okay, I see no other hands up. Christian, do you need something from us? Or would you like something from us?
If the group feels comfortable with a resolution of or support for this project, would welcome that. But other than that, I think that's it.
Well, thank you so much for coming to the BAC.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty, up next, we have the 2nd Street South improvements, 2nd Avenue South to 13th Avenue South, 0% with Dan Edgerton from Zan Associates. Hi, Dan.
Hey, friends, how's it going?
Good, thanks.
Great, thanks for having me. I'm going to share some slides with you, so bear with me as I switch the technology. As Dan said, my name is also Dan. I'm Dan Edgerton. I am a contractor with Public Works and the TPP group. I work under Nathan Koster. I work with Chris and do a lot of work there. My employer is Zan Associates, but I'm kind of functioning as an extension of staff as the project planner for this project. So I'm here in that capacity to tell you about the 2nd Street South project. So I've got maybe a dozen slides that I'll run through kind of quick to give a project overview, and then I'll pause and we can have any discussion that you might have for me today. So with that, a quick project overview. We are downtown in the Mill District, kind of by the Guthrie, by the Stone Arch Bridge. The project limits are 2nd Street South, so that's 1 block north or northeast of Washington Avenue. And we go from 2nd Ave on the west, so that's just past Hennepin, all the way down to 13th Avenue on the east, which is right up to 35W there. And then the project will kind of wrap around on 13th Avenue and make sort of an opportunistic connection to the West River Road trail. So that's the project limits. The scope of the project, really the impetus of this project, is that 2nd is planned for a pavement rehabilitation project in 2023, so next summer. And what that looks like is kind of a standard mill and overlay. It's a maintenance project designed to extend the life of the pavement. And what we're doing is taking an opportunistic look at the corridor, why the city is there, and doing the pavement rehabilitation. Are there opportunities to make additional improvements to the bikeway along the way? And so it's kind of a low impact type of project. It's being considered for funding through the Bikeway Funding program. It's Bike 28, if anybody follows along with that. But what that means is it's sort of a small level project. It's not a full reconstruction like your Grand Avenue or your Bryant Avenue, things like that. It's a lower level of impact. So the scope of the project is, 1, the pavement rehabilitation, as I just mentioned. Why they're there, they do the ADA curb ramps where they are needed. And then we are going to evaluate options as part of this project, my work, for upgrading the existing bikeway. And I'll talk more about what that looks like today and what it could look like. And then why we're there, making some spot intersection improvements. And I'll talk more about that as well. You can see the project goals on the screen. This is very similar wording to many of the city projects, but it's really about better managing the street, making it safer and more effective for all users, for everybody. So that it's a good route for everybody. Creating a better connection in the all ages and ability network. And then there are a lot there, as many of you will know, there's a lot of development in this area with new condos coming up. So there is a need to still make sure that we're thinking about reasonable access for residents and businesses and all of that kind of stuff. So that's a part of the puzzle as well here. A little bit on timeline. We're just getting started with this. Dan mentioned that this is 0%. That we don't have a concept design yet. Kind of have an idea of where it might go, but we need to go through the process and kind of vet that all out. So that's what we're doing now, is sort of the concept design and community engagement. The idea is that by later this summer, we'll have a recommended layout, and then we'll have kind of over the winter to do engineering, and then we can queue that up for installation this next summer, 2023, on the back of that pavement rehabilitation that I mentioned earlier. One thing to note, because this is a maintenance project and it's not a complete reconstruct, it follows a little bit different process than some of the construction projects that you see. It doesn't have a formal council layout approval. Instead, it goes through as a recommendation. That's noteworthy as you think about things like what's the BAC's role and passing a motion of support, that kind of thing. And we can talk more about that later. But that's the timeline. So I've got some slides that just show some pictures and some illustrations of what's out there today to ground folks if they're not familiar. Generally speaking, 2nd Street today has 2 through lanes of traffic. On the outside, it's got buildings, sidewalks. In some cases, there are boulevards. In some cases, there are not. It's got on-street parking on both sides, and then it's got on-street bike facilities on both sides. In some cases, there's a little bit of a buffer with the bike facilities just painted. In other cases, they're not. At any rate, they're the directional sort of traditional old school style on-street bike lanes. And so you can see the illustrated cross section on the bottom of kind of how that looks. So this is the stretch, that goes right by the Guthrie, by the Gold Medal Park. It's a really important connection for the bike network, the AAA network, and we'll show some maps later. In a few locations, there are these what I think are a temporary condition, temporary delineator posts that were installed. And the purpose of those temporary delineator posts is twofold. I mean, I think it helps to better manage vehicle speeds, to encourage safer vehicle speeds. But really, it provides an opportunity for a safer, shorter pedestrian crossing. So those medians, temporary style medians, exist on two places along this project. One is Park Avenue, and then the other one is 10th Avenue. So those both are, Park Avenue is just west of the Guthrie Theater, and 10th Avenue is just east of the Guthrie Theater, sort of making those connections to the Mill District, to the Stone Arch Bridge, that kind of thing. So they look like this. I've got another slide on this, but I mentioned earlier that we're looking at the potential to evaluate upgrades not only to the bikeway, but also to spot intersection areas. And these are them. These are the intersections that we're looking at. And finally, 11th Avenue. This is another intersection that's got a lot going on with these temporary delineator posts that were put in as part of another project a few years back. Maybe some of you are familiar with. We're also, while we're there, going to look at what's happening at this intersection and see if there's any improvements that we can make kind of within the scope of this project. So it's part of the puzzle. I just wanted to flash this slide. This will be familiar to many of you, but the point I like to make here is that 2nd Street is an east-west connection that's really critical on the AAA network. It provides direct connections to a lot of really high volume bike facilities. And one of the things that I've heard on this is, well, you've got Washington a block to the south, and we recently upgraded that to the cycle track. Yes, that's true, but that doesn't go all the way down. That doesn't go all the way to the 35W project area. And as of now, Washington County is a county road, or Washington Avenue is a county road, and the county doesn't have any plans to sort of finish that bike trail. So 2nd Street becomes that link in the network to make those connections. And so it's a really important bikeway connection for the city. So opportunity areas, I've touched on most of these, but what I'm tasked with is taking a look at this, as I mentioned, pavement rehab project, and seeing if there are sort of low cost, high benefit improvements that we can make with this project in an opportunistic way. Since we're going to be there anyway, are there things that we can go in and sort of improve? So that looks like the intersection improvements that I mentioned: Park Ave, 10th Ave, 11th Ave. There's also a bump out at the Guthrie that helps connect to their parking ramp that we'll take a look at. And then with the bikeway, today they have the directional bike lanes. Are there improvements that we can make? Can we upgrade that to a protected bikeway configuration? So that could be paint and delineator posts, kind of on the low end. On the higher end, maybe it's floating curbs, and there are some illustrations of what those look like. We can talk more about that. But can we upgrade that to a protected bikeway condition, and what does that look like? So just a few slides with more pictures, and I promise I'm almost done here. Intersection improvements, what that might look like is a floating slab of concrete to take the temporary delineator post pedestrian crossing and make it a more permanent median. So there's kind of an illustration of what that might look like. This is a terrible picture, I know, but I was out there a couple of weeks ago, right after we got our false spring and had a snowstorm. For the 11th Avenue intersection, one of the things that we're going to look at is, there's posts out there today, but can we do more of a permanent protected intersection? This picture on the bottom is a really nice sort of rehab retrofit protected intersection design that was put in as part of the Whittier-Lyndale Bikeway. This is actually 31st Street in Bladesdale, I believe. But can we clean up that 11th Avenue intersection to make it a little bit more intuitive for all the users? It's kind of hard now with the crosswalks and the conflict striping, which we talked about in the last presentation, and then the post. It's just it's a complicated intersection and there's a lot going on. So can we clean that up? And then bikeway improvements, I touched on this, but The sort of base level of improvement that we'll look at is, can we go to a delineator protected bikeway? And I think in this case, we would look at a two-way bikeway, probably on the north side of the street to avoid driveway conflicts. Hasn't been designed yet, so there's some flexibility there. Two-way bikeways tend to simplify decision points at the intersection. And we've had success in other parts of the city putting those in. If we can afford it within the budget of the Bike 28 program, I would love to see the in-street curb protected bike lanes go in, but it's a bigger cost item. So it's something that I'm thinking of as sort of like a continuum or a hierarchy. Like if I can recommend a base project, great, we'll do this at a minimum. And then if we can throw in additional features that will use, that will keep adding up until the point where we get to our budget cap and get the best project that we can afford. That's sort of how I'm looking at this. And this group can certainly help make that case and tell that story to the decision makers. So I look forward to some discussion there. Okay, so this is my last slide before I stop. Just quick on next steps. I'm doing community engagement now. This is it. We're just starting with you. I've also got neighborhood meetings. I've got a meeting with the Downtown Minneapolis Neighborhood Association later tonight. We'll do some direct one-on-one outreach with the adjacent properties. We'll meet with other community organizations in the area, mailings, things like that. All moving towards a recommendation on what we hope it'll look like later this fall, with the hopes of having the project installed in 2023. So that's the end of my presentation. So I'd like to pause for discussion, and I'll just I'll turn it back to Dan and open it up for questions and comments.
Okay, Janice.
Just to clarify, were you saying that right now there's 2 one-way bike lanes and that there's a possibility of a protected 2-way bike lane on the north side along the whole length? Is that what you were saying?
That's correct. What I'm kind of, haven't got to the design stage yet, but what we're kind of thinking is that it might look like a 2-way protected bike lane. Yes.
So that's the kind of thing that we should weigh in on a resolution, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
And we do kind of have it, just to chase that thread down a little bit. We do have it kind of sort of drawn out, but it hasn't been engineered yet. We think that the north side works better. There's fewer intersections, because you've got the park and you've got the theater. If there was a compelling reason to do it on the south side, we could look at it, but that's kind of where we are in the design process now.
Jeremy?
Hi, I'm really glad to see that this is being addressed. I happen to ride on this street all the time. So I have a number of suggestions. The first one, I actually spoke with Matthew Durdall about this a couple of years ago. On 13th Avenue, people park in the bike lane constantly. It's essentially viewed as a parking lane. So you need to access the University of Minnesota's parking ramp. There's I think is it an XL or a Centerpoint facility there, but there are a couple entrances to one of the condos there on the corner, and there's a parking lot. So there's no parking normally there. So if we could get that, and I think there's space for this, especially now that all the construction seems to be complete over there with the 11 being done, getting just delineated protected bike lanes the entire length of 13th. There's really no reason for there to be a bike lane there.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Yep. That's what I'm aiming for, Jeremy.
Okay. And I also want to say that I think the bidirectional protected bike lane on the north side would be great. There is a problem riding on 2nd in the winter in that the snow really accumulates in the parking lane. And so people end up parking in the bike lane because there's so much snow mounted up. If the PBL were on the north side and could get cleared, I think that would pretty much resolve that issue, because there wouldn't be parking and it would be get more light than the other side of the street does.
Yeah.
And it would also deal with the fact that bus drivers park in the bike lane all the time in front of the Guthrie. And so you get a lot of blockages of really big vehicles.
Yep.
And I wanted to second making the 11th Avenue intersection more robust and permanent, because it's great to see them, but it seems like at different intervals, those delineators are getting driven over.
Yep. And that's a common refrain we also have heard from the neighborhood group as well, you know, where they aesthetics and all of that and safety, they want to see it more permanent. And it's going to be, I don't want it to sound like the miser here, but it's going to be the issue with this project isn't going to be that we don't have support to do it. It's going to be that we can't afford to do it in some cases. It's sort of this opportunistic look, but I'm definitely hoping we can get in and do something at 11.
Okay, great. And I just wanted to reiterate, yeah, that the 13th one, it seems like the lowest hanging fruit, because it would just inconvenience few people. So anyway, thank you very much.
Aaron.
Hey, yeah, thank you. So good to see you again, Dan. I'm excited about this project too for a lot of the same reasons Jeremy was just talking about. I think the snow clearance alone is going to make a huge difference on second. One thing that I would urge is, obviously, I know you're gonna, within the budget, look for the budget to curb protect it. So curb protected for the duration, especially in a two-way bicycle facility where the basically cyclists, since we travel on the right side, will be going head on toward cars. The closest cyclists to the cars will be heading kind of in that head-on zone, and so making sure that if the funding's there to curb protect it, that would be ideal. One suggestion I would say, if the funding isn't there, is if you look at that image you were showing as an example with the Whittier-Lyndale Bikeway, I've become pretty familiar with that already. So if you were to take each of those little corners of the protected zone and expand it, like, so see where the snow is on the bottom right of that picture. Say you start another section of concrete there and just continue it long enough so cyclists don't have to worry about a car kind of accidentally going into that zone, but really make it feel like a curb protected zone, and then use those delineators in between intersections. I've been kind of thinking that might work as a lower budget solution for some protected bikeways for a while. But I think this sounds like, based on the budget constraints, could be that time. So really, since most conflicts would happen at those intersections anyway, you'd be in pretty good shape. But I would also, obviously, you must be looking at the Whittier-Lyndale project for some examples, but I really like kind of the jog you take at certain intersections. I know, like around 28th or 26th Street and First Avenue, in the non-curb, like hopefully soon to be curb protected zone. But I really think that works well, and I think drivers right now are a little confused by it, and I know I've seen cars turn right in front of me, so that's not great. But I think over time that'll start to become more clear, and if it's concrete too instead of just paint with bollards, that'll be more clear. So just urge you to continue looking at that project, I guess, for some examples.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Aaron. And I'm very familiar with that location and have been out there looking at it as we think about First Avenue, you know, and what that looks like. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Okay, are there any other hands, people that wish to speak? Questions? All right, I've got one question to ask Dan, and this is, sorry, it's a bit of a curveball, but I'm trying here. And that is, as you're reviewing this, could you maybe just take an eye to available bike parking? You had mentioned that this is a busy pass-through and all that stuff, but where do people in groups park? In other words, there's different kinds of parking now. Mill City Museum is the one I'm most familiar with, where it's basically posts, and there's a couple of them there where you can get 2 bikes on, or if you're with another person, start to get more. But I'm talking about group parking and where that might be able to be obvious that you'll see it as a biker rather than it disappearing behind a car or whatever. I know on Lake Street, I brought up the aspect with the amount of parking that remained there that maybe to look at some bike corrals. And I don't know, it would just be nice to have another different eye on it to take a look. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. That's a great comment. I'll definitely take a look. It gets, as you know, complicated down there, and working with the counterparts within the city, mobility coordinator and others, you know, for instance, at 11th, that's where we've got the kind of pilot of the scooter corrals that are, it's just painted on now, but, you know, look, who goes where and how we allocate that space is part of it. And, you know, I'll take the comment back about looking at sort of doing an inventory of the bike parking, but also specifically group bike parking.
And it would be a place to begin with. That's in the Transportation Action Plan as a goal to be looking at. And so, great, thank you. I'm gonna, Phil has a question.
Oh, you know, just Dan, I just wanted to reiterate that there really are a lot of group activities where people, I'm thinking of the McKnight Foundation. I've been to meetings where it's just impossible to find a place to park. So the McKnight Foundation, Mill City, obviously the Guthrie, the music school is there. There's a city building. It's really a big concentration. So if ever there were going to be some larger place for bike parking, this would be, somewhere in there. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Jeremy.
Oh yeah, just a couple more thoughts briefly. I just wanted to echo what Jesse said about the curb protected bike lane or bidirectional PBL, because and I realize this is obviously cost related, but you know, the reason I go in this segment every day is because I'm burlying a child to daycare downtown. And I use the Dinkytown Greenway, which sends me out on the 13th Avenue. And I would never take my children on Second as is now. I always go on West River Parkway, which is generally nice, but has some problematic stretches. But if there were the curb protection there, that would kind of change part of the experience, especially when have vulnerable cargo. And then just an extra thought, I've noticed a lot on especially University Avenue and 4th Street Southeast, that folks, when there used to be plastic delineators in that bike lane buffer, which for some reason they're not, folks would just, at the intersections, just pull right into the PBL. So the delineators are great, but they also, I think, kind of create a sense of like, oh, this is like a automobile cozy or something.
Yeah, you see it. Yep.
So if there were any way to kind of put maybe a bollard in the middle or something, I mean, I wouldn't want people to run into something when they're biking, but something that would just literally preclude a person from pulling a vehicle into the PBL.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's a driver behavior thing. We see that on 11th Ave right in this area where people just think, right, and they're probably not going to do it again once they realize they're kind of stuck in there in between the delineator. But I have seen other areas, especially with the two-way, where they do that post kind of right where the striping line would be, right where you go in. Maintenance doesn't like that because if they're going to get a plow blade down there. But we'll take that back and see if there's anything different we can do to make that clear that that's not a driving lane.
Yeah, just something. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Okay, Deanna, and then we need to go.
Yeah, I know. Just a very quick comment about the other group that's there. I probably am on this weekly as well. And the other group that's there is the farmers market during the during the summer months. And, you know, and if you're, and when it's there are people going back and forth, there's cars coming up and down, there's bikes coming through. And I don't know if there is some kind of nice way to be able to kind of manage all of that, particularly pedestrian activity. That comes from the farmer's market. And of course, obviously, when the Guthrie lets out, it's the same kind of thing. But I don't, you know, just some kind of nice way to have everybody doing the nice thing there would be great.
Yeah, the event traffic is a point well taken. Thank you. And I know you got to go, but for what it's worth, I think having the two-way protected bike lane, sort of pulling the bike facility away, will help to reinforce. Here's the sidewalk, here's the bike facility, here's where the parking is. You know, it'll help to delineate those spaces and hopefully help with event traffic.
All righty, and you could use some support on this?
I don't necessarily need a resolution of support now. If you think you could give one, you know, with any kind of specific language, I'll take it. But that's kind of where we're at. Yeah, like I mentioned, this doesn't go through the same approval process, but definitely anything you can do to help us head in the right direction is appreciated.
Great. Okay, Deanna. Deanna has her hand up. Okay, well, thank you very much, Dan, and thank you for Plymouth Avenue.
Okay, thanks. I love that one too. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, we've got the 9th and 10th Street bikeways downtown, 10% with Chris Kartizer.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And hello, everybody. I'll try and make this presentation quick so we can still try and get out on time, but happy to stay as long as needed for questions. So 9th and 10th Street bikeways, we've been looking at these in different variations for a number of years in Minneapolis. We're currently looking to have this project budgeted for 2023. So next year we'd be looking at installation and hopefully try and arrange that so that it'd be on the earlier side of implementation next year. Little bit, some background information, a lot of pedestrians, some kind of low mid traffic, bike traffic currently today, and then 3,000 to 12,000 vehicles in different parts of the area. And there is a project map there, so you can see we're going from Hennepin Avenue on kind of the northwest side to Chicago. This is actually Centennial at this part, and then Park here on 9th and 10th. And for those who don't know, 9th and 10th downtown are parallel one-ways, and so that's why we're looking at these together. You can see existing conditions there. We've got the bike on the left side, just a standard bike lane with a small buffer, 3 lanes of traffic, and then parking on both sides of the roadway. 10th has parking, a little bit less parking along the corridor, but some parking as well. I think 23 out of 23 spots on 10th, and about, I think it's 67. It comes out to about an even 100 between the two corridors. So around 70 parking spots on 9th here. 9th is a high injury street. And also just generally, you know, downtown has a decent amount of crashes. So that's something that we're paying close attention to. And we will be treating this. I'm working with our Vision Zero team to make sure that they get their Vision Zero aspects that are typical for theirs and put it in with this project. The Bikeway project has a potential to satisfy a lot of the Vision Zero design that we would do, but there's a few extra things that we'll add in that we may not typically do on all of our bike projects. And yeah, so I'm going to switch over. So briefly, I just want to say, explain why it's at 10%. This is the first time that you all have ever seen this project, haven't brought it before. The reason I put it at 10% and the reason there's been some design work is some of you may know that there's a history on 9th and 10th. sometime in the last decade, I want to say maybe 6 or 7 years ago, there was conversations about putting a bikeway and potentially a protected bikeway, and that did not happen. And so I just wanted to kind of be sensitive of that, to take the time on the front end to do some, I've called it a proof of concept here, just as kind of a starter template for some of the conversations for some of those folks that weren't interested in this the last time around. And essentially what we've done here is say, okay, with our new design standards that are different than when we looked at this 7 years ago, are we able to maintain particularly kind of the parking with this temporary bikeway design, and also for the most part travel lanes. There are some parts where we're looking at removing travel lanes in order to make sure that we can have a AAA facility, and more conversations needed on that. But that's just a little bit on why there's been some more design work. This is by no means a finished concept. A lot more work to go into this, and looking forward to kind of feedback on what this looks like. So with that, I'll just kind of run through quickly. On 9th, we have a parking protected bikeway for the length of the corridor. So we're looking at maintaining, and there's currently 2 travel lanes out there on 9th today. And so we're just maintaining what's out there in terms of parking and travel lanes, but using the extra road space to go into this buffered area and the bike lane. One thing that will definitely change, and we've started looking into, but it's not quite ready to bring here, is these protected elements. You know, we're going to be looking a lot more closely at what the best design is there in terms of mixing zones or protected intersections and things like that. So I expect a lot more detail to come out in that by the next time that I would come back here. Some of these blocks are pretty standard, and because there's one ways, there's no turning movements. So this is just, as you can see, kind of an easy one, and that is just a protected bikeway the whole way through. We don't have to worry about any left turns there. Also looking at maintaining all current access routes, loading zones, and things like that. Again, these kind of transition areas could look very different in the next iteration, and likely will in many cases. We do have examples that look like this one in the city, where we kind of have a mixing zone and there's still some protection, but the vehicles that are turning are in there with the bike lane. This is kind of NACTO guidance, kind of tells us how to do this taper and mixing zone and things like that. And I'll just keep moving. A lot of these blocks look similar to some of the previous ones. And as we get closer to Hennepin here, a slight taper up, and then we would connect into the Hennepin Ave bikeways there. And then quickly on 10th, like I said, a lot less parking. So there's less parking protected or no parking protected on certain blocks.
Say like 2 minutes after 6, I'll quit my meeting.
The two blocks here that we'll have to look that are the most constrained blocks on the corridor. So 10th here between LaSalle and Marquette is a little bit trickier, in that we're at minimums already with a 5-foot bike lane, 10-foot travel lanes, and then technically 7-foot parking is the minimum you can go, but when we have all other minimums, then 8 is the minimum that we can go. So this is very constrained, and we are in conversations about what it would look like to remove a lane of travel here to ensure that we have a AAA bikeway the entire length of the corridor. So that would be for both of these blocks. This one's a little bit trickier because we have the bump outs here that kind of secure the, secure the parking. But also if we were able to take a travel lane, we would be able to get a AAA facility in there. Then the rest of 10th is pretty straightforward. The bike lane stays on that side of the roadway the whole time. There's a couple mixing zones. We'll also look at some protected elements where there's space for it along 10th. And then it tapers down to 2 lanes here, a little bit less vehicle traffic. And it's pretty straightforward until then we get to this intersection, which is Park and 10th, and we'll be looking at some very detailed design about how to do this right now. The tricky part is having a bikeway where you want to allow the bike to turn left, but the bikeway is on the far side on Park. So you'd essentially be kind of putting the cars turning left onto Park in conflict with the bikes there. There's a few different ways to manage it. This was a very preliminary kind of look. I think we'd be looking at a mixture of protection and kind of mixing zones and allowing bikes to get where they need to go. And currently today, there's kind of something here that allows bikes to go straight here and continue down 10th as well. So that's just a really quick kind of throw the whole layout at you. I'm happy to go back over any details, take questions, comments. Definitely plan to be back here at a minimum of once, but possibly more than that. And actually, one other thing that I should mention, which I think we talked about last time, is that we are putting in a regional solicitation application for this project. Not for the project that I just showed you, but for 9th and 10th as a separate project that would follow this one. And so with that project, we would be looking at putting more curb in. We could potentially reevaluate this design entirely, or just kind of protect this design by putting curb in, or potentially, depending on kind of the funds available for that, at certain points, maybe putting bikes behind the curb on the sidewalk if it makes sense. But all that would kind of be figured out in a separate process if we're awarded those funds. So, oh yeah, Joey.
I guess, has there been any, two questions. First, has there been any consideration of swapping the lanes to the right side of the street for both streets? Because like you were saying at the end there, I mean, both of these sections end with connecting to a bike lane on the other side of on the right side, which is, I mean, I've done both of these pretty frequently, and it's pretty gnarly to get across there and continue on either 9th or 10th.
Yeah, so we have thought about that and looked at that. I'll say politically right now, I don't see that happening on 9th. The downtown council and business owners have been very engaged about curbside uses downtown of late, and you may be familiar with the temporary kind of jersey barriers that are out on 9th now, and that was kind of a public safety effort. And so those stakeholders are very interested in activating the space on that side of the street with a bikeway, which those are some of the same stakeholders that didn't want a bikeway on here at all 6 or 7 years ago. And so that's something that with 9th taking into account with the regional solicitation, I think that because that would be a more substantial budget, this is like 200,000, whereas a regional solicitation could be 5 or 6 million. That might be an opportunity to look at if it makes sense to change it, and if there are other design things that we can do to mitigate some of those curbside uses at that point. And then 10th, it is a lot more simple for the majority of the corridor for 10th on this side, because there's basically no parking for the most part, except the 2 tricky blocks. And then also this intersection would be really tough here it'd almost be harder, I think, than navigating the kind of switching of sides at the end of it with the interchange. And so we have looked at that, and it's something that we could look at again, I think probably most likely for the regional solicitation. But if this group does have a strong opinion on that, I don't want to just shut that down. So I would be interested in hearing. I don't want to completely stifle that conversation, but that's just some of the thoughts I've had to date on that.
That's a good point on 10th. I hadn't been thinking about the interchange there. But yeah, my second question, I guess, was going to be about, you mentioned the jersey barriers. Has that been, I guess, successful? Because most of this looks great. I'm very excited, but for that portion between Nicollet and Hennepin on 9th, I mean, switching from Jersey barriers to Flexipost is going to be making it less protected than it is now.
Yeah, so the Jersey barriers were never meant to be permanent, and that's not a permanent solution. The downtown council actually paid for the installation of those, so that wasn't public works. I did help coordinate that. We coordinated with that. That was a very direct request that came out of property owners, MPD, and the downtown council about dealing with those issues right there. It's never been the intention to automatically decide that we wouldn't like today with that temporary, we don't have any parking out there. Not that we couldn't take away parking with this conversation, but that would also have to be a part of the conversation. You know, per space, I think it's about $50,000 a year that a parking spot downtown brings in, and so it's no small. That's no small amount that goes into our general fund and allows us to do some of this stuff. So, not that should be the only reason that like we always keep parking, but it's something else that we'd have to discuss. And in terms of whether it's a success or not, from the folks who requested that and the downtown council, they seem very happy with it. In terms of, you know, the public safety issues have lessened somewhat. And they're also aware that that's not a long-term solution.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jesse?
Yeah, out of necessity, I've used 10th a lot to go back home after picking up my daughter from school by bike. And I feel like that the two most stressful blocks are the ones that have the least amount of treatment here, for the ones that have the parking on both sides. So I would definitely urge to see what we can do about having minimums for everything, because the 8 plus the 5 is a 13 total, and it's still not enough to have enough room for folks to park and to have people riding bikes next to them, especially because of the different side of the road and not being expected. I think oftentimes here we find ourselves riding on the outside white line of the bike lane, because the people who are parking here are usually either on the striping for the bike lane or a little bit into the bike lane. And then obviously there's dooring situations too, but I haven't been doored yet, but it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are very good points. And like, so you had asked about existing conditions. These are actually the existing conditions out there today, what's shown on the screen. And so, you know, it's not a AAA facility. And if we don't improve that by taking away a lane of travel would be really the only way to do that, or potentially parking to get that protection. So I appreciate all those points.
Aaron?
Yeah. So I may not have any groundbreaking question, but I'm just curious, is the plan then, because this is a AAA network, or would it be to have curb protection then through it, like concrete curb, or would it be bollards?
No, thanks for that question. For this initial project, we haven't budgeted for curb. I want to say that a curb protected bikeway roundabout, I would say, is like, I think maybe 100,000 a block. I might be a little off on that, but in comparison, we have about 200,000 for this first project. But like I said, that regional solicitation, I think, is a strong application, potentially our strongest bikeway application of this round. And so I'm pretty hopeful that we'd be able to kind of follow up within a couple of years to have that curb protection, which I think would be ideal out here.
I guess kind of a secondary thought then with that is, I assume you heard what I was saying with the last project, that like maybe you do something where you kind of do like a little bit of curb protection just right at some key intersections, just to really like solidify that it's a bikeway and spare yourself $100,000 and just kind of like give it that minimal amount of protection and then use flexi posts in between those blocks?
Yeah, you know, given that we'll be coming back with a much bigger project that will have curb work, I'm really hesitant to put any money into something permanent that we might just knock down. And we are like tight on this budget already, kind of pushing it. So I appreciate the sentiment. What I will say is like we are looking at having the flex posts and painted lines kind of outlining those same football shapes and protected elements, which I think, you know, obviously those do get hit and they do come down, but we'd only have to maintain those theoretically for 2 to 3 years before we can get in and make those more permanent on this corridor.
Good.
So Chris, this is Dan, and so is this project, there's no resurfacing of the street, it's pretty much paint and bollards, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we might look at, I know there are parts of 9th and I don't know, maybe Jesse knows about 10th, but where the element right up against the curb, in some parts that's like an extended cement gutter, and some parts it's asphalt. I believe it mixes both of those throughout these 2 streets. Some of it's in rough shape, so we might look to like fill that, but it wouldn't be, we wouldn't mill like huge sections, and we're not doing a resurfacing on the entire streets.
Thank you. Okay, Janice? Nope. Anybody else have any questions here for Chris? Thank you, Chris. This is looking good.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Good comments.
All righty. I think there's Chris, would you like a resolution on this or some support?
I don't need one at this point. If there's anything like really substantial that you all want to call out, you know, I mean, maybe it could be helpful to have a stance on the spot between LaSalle and Marquette. So if you all wanted to do something that, either way, I can bring the feedback back from the group. I think it's probably pretty supported across the group, whether there's a resolution or not, that you'd want that to be a more protected legs.
Okay, so we have several resolutions that are worth taking a look at. I've asked in the past if there's people that are particularly interested in leading up any of these. My intent would be to have something roughed out by the end of the week and then to distribute it to the members that have attended this meeting for comment before it heads to the full BAC meeting. And I see Phil's hand up.
Yeah, sure, Dan. I'll help with the. I can start to sketch out the Minnehaha between Franklin and 24th.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Alrighty. With that, any comments or updates, announcements? That's the word.
Maybe I'll put in one last plug for applications due Friday for membership. So I don't know if everybody who's planning on reapplying has already done that, but yeah, deadline's coming up.
Yes, Chris, a question about that. I finally got a video chat with my Congress or my ward person, and she was saying that she did not expect to see the applications for her ward until after the 15th. Is that, or does she get them as people apply?
Yeah, no, I've even asked, and I didn't get a response to see if I could get the applications or have an understanding. And I don't know if they're just really busy and that's why they didn't get back to me. But but yeah, I mean, typically they collect all of them and then afterwards they would do that. So it will be a quick turnaround. I'll be reaching out to council members for confirmation on who they're picking quickly so that we can get in the cycle for council to have the new members approved so that we can actually have members start in June. BAC is June, right?
Yes.
The PAC is July. Yeah, I always forget which one's which, but yeah. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. So I'll be reaching out quickly with that information.
Good.
Okay, with that, it's 6:02, and if there's nothing else, I think we're ready to adjourn.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Dan.
Bye-bye.